All right, we're back with Basic Bob. This time it's going to be Basic Bob thinking through how to build hands. So he is going to advertise the four-cornered hand type, which is a hand that has a card that is strong in each corner, and that makes sure the hand is going to be reasonably directionally balanced. He has power in every direction, as you can see on the hand on the right. He has 1-7 in all four directions, and at least a 6 as well in every direction. And by having cards that are strong in each corner, that have those two powerful outfacing values from that corner, he makes sure he has strong power in every direction. Now the fifth card, he doesn't want to overbalance the hand too much, have another corner for the same corner that seems redundant and maybe punishable. So what he does is he has what I like to call a utility card, which is either going to be a card that is kind of balanced in each direction, or one that is good horizontally or vertically, so that it has strengths distinct from what every other card in the hand has. So when building this hand, he first asks, and this is the hand we saw him play with in the first Basic Bob video, is what's the strongest corner available on level 4? And the answer is, it's a 7-6 corner. So he's going to start by saying, I want 4 7-6 corners. And then he's going to ask, okay, I want 7-6 corners that are really powerful. So we're on level 4, and I know the best things people will be throwing at me are 7s and 6s. And I know they can't have a double 7 corner, a 7-7, and they're probably not going to be running that many 6-6s. Like 7-6, has 1-7 and 1-6. So he thinks, I want to be well set to fight against 7s and against 6s. I'm not going to focus too much on 7s or too much on 6s, because they both seem like they're going to be important threats. Now, having 7s in the hand inherently gives some power to fight 6s, because of course 7s can overpower 6s. So he's probably going to lean a little towards fighting against 7s rather than fighting against 6s, but he cares about both. And if we want to fight against 7s and 6s, the key when looking for a hand that can deal well with a specific number is to look for gaps of the right amount, right? If you want to plus wall a 7, the wall counts as 10, the 7 counts obviously as a 7, so to plus that, you're going to need a gap of 3, right? 4 and 1 have a gap of 3, and indeed 7 plus 4 equals 10 plus 1. 5 and 2, 6 and 3, 7 and 4. These are the gaps of 3 we're going to be looking for. Obviously, if higher number cards were available, but for some reason you still needed to fight 7s, 8-5, 9-6, 10-7. And to fight 6s, 6 is a gap of 4 from 10, so we're going to look at gaps of 4 on the card. So on our cards, we want gaps in our numbers of 3 and 4. So you can see why the 3-2 really powers up the 6, right? They're kind of enablers to the 6, because now the 6 has a gap of 3 with the 3, which means if touching the right wall, that 6 can now flip opposing 7s. And if touching the other wall, that 6 can now flip opposing 6s, because the 2 powers that part up. So if the top card, the 7-6-3-2, is played in 7, it can plus wall using its 6, both 6s and 7s. And it can overpower anything below a 6, so that 6 suddenly can overpower and take anything on the level set. It becomes very powerful. So 7-6-3-2s are kind of a way to say, my 7's already really good, and I want to make my 6 incredibly powerful. And so it chooses numbers on the back side that power up the front side, the more powerful side, by having them be gaps of 3 and 4. There are other 7-6 corners that have interesting effects here. A 7-6-4-3, the 4 powers up the 7, now that 7 can take other 7s. The 3 powers up the 6, now that 6 can take 7s. And something I should have mentioned with 7-6-3-2s and also effects there, the 3 powers up the 7 a little. Not as much, because it can't take something it couldn't take already, but it can now plus wall 6s, which can set off combos. So it does have a little more power than it would normally have. It could always take 6s, because a 7, takes a 6, but now sometimes it will plus wall and thus combo that 6 as well. A 7-6-4-2, the 4 powers up the 7 to be able to take other 7s, the 2 powers up the 6 to be able to take other 6s, and you can also argue that 2s power up 7s because they let the 7 plus wall 5s, but as we can see from looking at the hand and looking what the most powerful corner on the level is, we're not going to see that many 5s on that level, so setting up your 7 to be able to plus wall 5s is slight value, but maybe not as high as you might think. A 7-6-4-1, the 4 as we know powers up the 7. What does the 1 do? Well, the 1 doesn't have a 3 or 4 gap to the 6 or 7, but it does have a 3 gap to the 4. So the idea of a 7-6-4-1 is that the backside we haven't powered up the front side as much. The 7-6 aren't as powerful as they are with some of these other number combos, but the 4-1 means the backside of it has some plus wall potential and might be able to do something there. A 7-6-3-3. The threes are, of course, redundant, but you're not always touching the wall you want to be touching, and so it gives more chance to make sure that your 6 can capture 7s, because you've got more of that 3 gap, and that your 7 can plus wall opposing 6s. So I think these are all acceptable alternatives. In general, I think the consensus of players has been 7-6-3-2s are the best, though this is in part because there aren't enough 7-6-4-3s to actually make a full hand of them. 7-6-3-2s are the ones where you have the most options. As you can see here, it was easy to find one for each corner, and there are alternative ones for many of these corners. So it is easiest to build around 7-6-3-2s, and that may have been why they obtained popularity. If you decided one of the other number combos was better, I wouldn't really be able to argue with you. I haven't played a ton of level 4 personally, and I don't have a strong sense of when you'd want to use one versus others. But I think the core idea of all of them is we want gaps of 3 and 4, and we want that strong 7-6 part. So if you wanted to build a different way, that would be totally reasonable. This is just what I assigned to a basic Bob. And then the final thing he really wants is he wants one of his corners to be plus wallable back both ways. So you'll notice each card can plus wall the next corner over. So if we started with 7-6-3-2 in 7, its strong corner, you'll notice the corner for 1, 2-7-6-3, can plus wall that card in 4, because the 6 and 3 have a gap of 3, and thus can plus wall the 7. So each card can plus wall the next one over. Bomb in 1 can be plus walled by our corner for 3, Tiamat. Our corner for 3 can be plus walled by our corner for 9. Our corner for 9 can be plus walled by our corner for 7. And going around the other way, you'll notice each card. So that way we went around one of clockwise, counterclockwise, but going the other way, we can overpower. So the 7-6-3-2 and 7 can be overpowered by 6-3-2, 7, and 8. So each of our potential corners, we know we can take back both ways. But Basic Bob doesn't just want to be able to take back both ways, he wants to be able to plus wall both ways so that he can lock the card in and potentially secure it. And if he overpowers it, he is leaving himself open to being comboed back. And this is where the utility card comes in, because with the 4 corners, we are able to retake each corner both ways, but we are not able to plus wall and secure each corner both ways. And that's where the 2-6-3-6 comes in, and now we have a starter. 3-2, 7, 6, and 3 can be plus walled from 6 by 6-3-2, 7, but it can also now be plus walled in 2 rather than just overpowered by 2-6-3-6. And that's where the hand really comes together for him, is the utility card provides a different value that makes sure he can plus wall both ways, so he has a card for each corner, and he has an intended starter. And this is kind of the typical, I think, 4-corner hand. And Basic Bob will always build 4-corner hands. There are other ways to build. I'll talk about other ones in other videos, but I think a really good basic way to build is you build the 4-corner hand, and the key is figure out what the best corners are, figure out what numbers you have to beat, so you actually use the best cards, not just the cards that look good. For instance, if there was a card 7-6-5-5, now that might be powerful enough because it's just so much higher total value than the other numbers on the level that you'd use it, but the 5s don't actually help the 6 or the 7 part, right? And instead, Basic Bob is choosing cards where the back part really helps the front part to choose kind of the most powerful cards available, even if they're not the highest raw number. You know, he's picking 7-6-3-2s over 7-6-3-3s, even though those have a higher total number, because he thinks these are better cards at dealing with the numbers we need to beat. And so Component 1, figure out the strong corners. Have a strong corner in each corner. Component 2, but figure out actually what we want from those corners, not just the front side, not just that we want 7-6 corners, but the back side too, such that we can fight against the best the cards we're likely to see on the level and have strong plus wall capabilities against them. And then the 5th card is a utility card. It's something that can be horizontal or vertical or more balanced, but hopefully it helps us defend our starter so that we have an intended starter with the hand. So what if he was going to make a hand on a different level? So let's look at how he would make a level 7 hand. So we'd first go, what's the strongest corner available? Okay, it's an 8-8 corner. That means I both want my corners to be 8-8s, and I want gaps of 2 on my cards, because a gap of 2 is what's going to plus wall 8s. So I'd love an 8-8-6 corner, but those don't exist. So we can't use a 6 to power up the 8s to be able to take opposing 8s. So instead, okay, we'll use a 5, because a 5 helps the 8s take 7s, and presumably there are still going to be 7s running around, so 5 seems the most useful thing to power up at the 8s. And then, can we power the 5 up? Yeah, we can. We can give a 3 in the back and use the 3 to power up the 5, so it can also have some taking 8 powers. 4-2 would also work, but I think the 5's a little more useful to helping the 8 plus wall opposing 7s, which are going to be more frequent than opposing 6s. So basic Bob is going to go with 8-8-5-3s, and for a utility card, 5-7-5-7 is an incredibly popular choice. It's just incredibly good at plus walling 8s. And you can see why. It has lots of gaps of 2. But looking at this hand, and this would be his first draft of the hand, he would say, okay, I have my 4 really strong corners, I have a good utility card, but I don't have a starter, right? There is none of the 8-8 corners can he take back both ways when played in their preferred corner. He can take back each of them one way with the 5-7-5-7, but because they can't plus wall each other, there is none of the starters he can take back both ways. So this would be his first draft of a hand, but it would not be a hand he'd actually play. He'd want to make an adjustment, which is he'd want to swap out 1 or 2 of the corners to something a little weaker corner-wise, but with some plus wall potential to make sure he had a good starter. All right, is it going to go? Yep, there we go. So here's take 2. He swapped out 2 of the 8-8 corners and put in 8-7-6-4s. Now that's a little weaker in the corner, it's an 8-7, not an 8-8, but he still has cards for each of the 4 corners that are very good in those corners. He still has at least 1 8 and often 2 8s in every direction in the hand. You'll notice he went for 8-7-6-4 instead of something like 8-7-7, because 8-7-7 with like a 2 in the back has no plus wall potential against 8s and 7s. 8-7-6-4s, you'll notice there's a gap of 3 between the 4 and the 7, so it is a way to fight 7s, and there are multiple gaps of 2 between the 4 and the 6 and the 6 and the 8, and that gives ways to plus wall opposing 8s. So 8-7-6-4 is a really nice dynamic card. It's still a pretty powerful corner. We only had to drop from 8-8 to 8-7. We didn't give up that much value on the strong corner front. And now we have these cards that are really dynamic in being able to fight against both 8s and 7s. And we now have a starter. 8, 3, 5, 8, and 9 is now our starter. We can plus wall it back multiple ways from 8. Now 2 different ways, one with 7-8-6-4, the bottom card, and one with 5-7-5-7. And we can plus wall it back from 6 with 4-6-8-7. So we now have a starter. We're happy. We have 4 strong corners, we have a utility card, and we have a starter we can take back both ways. And we checked and made sure our cards were good against the numbers we're likely to see, 8s and 7s. And here, because now we have 2 different ways to take back from 8, you could swap out the utility card to something else if you wanted. I still think this is just a very useful, good utility card and probably what you'd want to stick with, but you'd have lots of choice. You could pick a card that is good vertically instead of horizontally. You could pick a quite different card. There's lots of room to maneuver with what you want out of your utility card. And I think these are kind of straightforward hands to make, but there's lots of room to think about what really are the best corners available. Maybe you decide, I don't actually like 8-8 corners at all. I want all 8-7-6-4s or all 8-7-7, something else that you think has more combo potential. 8-7-5-4s are really good too. So I think there's a bunch of options in how you think about what you think the best corners are. So what you choose for your corners. Figuring out how you want to support your starter and what your utility card is. I think there's a bunch of room for creativity. It is not necessarily trivial to just make these hands easily. As we saw with just picking 8-8 corners, the hand didn't work, we didn't have a starter. So finally, to end the video, I want you to make your own hand. I've selected 25 cards from level 8. I will tell you the strongest corner available is 9-9, followed by 9-8. There are a bunch of different utility card options here. Hopefully when you look at these cards, some of them jump out at you as, yeah, that's a good useful card I want in my hand. And others jump out at you as, I don't like that card very much. I don't think that card has any chance to make my hand. Because I think some of these cards are a lot better than other of these cards. And especially for the kind of hand build we're looking for, some of these cards should jump out at you as just garbage and irrelevant to your hand. And that's good. We should be able to look at these cards and think some of these are useful and some of these are not. Because cards do not come all equal. And one key to how Basic Bob makes hands is he doesn't use weak cards. He's not someone trying to creatively make weak cards come together, or he's not someone who just doesn't understand which cards are good. He identifies the good cards and he runs them. And so I think you should pause the video here and try to pick 5 cards that you think make a good 4-corner hand. I'm not saying this is the only type of hand one can make, but I think it's a useful type of hand to be comfortable making because I think it is an effective type of hand. So last chance to pause and think about how you'd build a hand. I will then give an example of one I might build, and if you built something similar or different, that's fine. Just making sure we followed what we've seen so far. So last chance to pause. All right, so on the left we have the failed version. I picked all 9 9s and I picked a utility card. This isn't the best utility card available, but I wanted to emphasize 7-8-3-8 has a lot of ability to plus wall 9s. The 7 plays really well with the 8s, and so it might be a better card than you'd think just looking at it without thinking, what's the numbers we need to beat? The number we need to beat is 9s, and it's a pretty good card at beating 9s. Not the best card, we'll get to that, but a pretty good card. But it doesn't give us a starter, right? We have the same problem that we saw with the 8-8 corners, is the 9-9 corners cannot plus wall each other. I do want to identify that I picked strong 9-9 corners, right? I did not pick the 9-9-1-1. That has no useful gaps. We're looking for gaps of 1 and 2 because we want to be able to plus wall 8s and 9s, especially 9s. So I did not pick something that has gaps of 0 or gaps of 3. 9952 I think is a defensible choice. The 5-2 can plus wall 7s, but 9943 seems a lot more powerful because the 4-3 part can plus wall 9s. And for the corner where I didn't have a 9943, I picked a 9932 because that again can plus wall 9s, and I see that as more important than plus walling 7s. But if you did pick one of the 9952s, that's fine as well. Being able to plus wall 7s is useful, and the raw power of a 5 is definitely better than the raw power of, a 3. As you can see with the hands here, there are a bunch of 4s running around. The 5 may come into effect. So if you picked that, totally reasonable choice. There were lots of 9952s to pick here, but I hope you considered the trade-off of you're taking a little raw power, but you're giving up a little plus wall potential. So sorry about clicking to the wrong slide there. It does it all the time. It doesn't move when I want it to, and then I click it again and it moves too. So looking at the hand on the left, it doesn't actually get us to what we want. It's strong in each direction, but it does not have a starter. The 7-8-3-8 lets us take back a starter in 1 or 3 from 2, but not from 4 or 6, not from below. So instead, let's just swap out one of the 9 9s for a 9-8. And the first of the 2 hands you can see on the right has Ifrit swapped in as the 3rd card for Mont Blanc, now has the 9-6-2-8. And because of the 9-8, that 9 and that 8 have a gap of 1, suddenly it can take downward 9s in the far corner via plus wall. So suddenly with that one little change of dropping 1-9-9 for a 9-8, 4-9-9-3 and 1 is now a viable starter. And so we've given the hand a starter. And the second hand, I did basically the same thing. I swapped out the first card, 9-9-3-4, for 8-9-3-4, which seems a little weaker, but it has this plus wall potential because the 9 and the 8 work really well together. And then I changed the utility card to an 8-7-6-5 type because I wanted to emphasize those are really good cards. If you look at it in terms of like raw power, it seems like we have 9-9 and 9-8 corners. 8-7 just doesn't seem that strong a corner. But if you look at the gaps on the card, there are 3 different gaps of 1, 8-7, 7-6, 6-5. It's very good at taking 9s, and it's quite good at taking 8s because 8-6 and 7-5 are also 2 gaps. So it is in fact a very good card at taking 9s and 8s. It's a really nice utility card on this level, and for the hand you can see on the far right, the intended starter is 3-2-9-9 and 3, because that new utility card, 6-5-7-8, can plus wall it from 6, and the corner card we switched in, 8-9-3-4, can plus wall it from 2. So I'm not saying these were the best hands you could have made. There are lots of different ways you could have built a 4-corner hand, and hopefully you built something like this. If you used more 9-8 corners and fewer 9-9 corners, that's totally fine. If you use different 9-9 corners, 9-9-5-2 I think is defensible. Something like 9-9-1-1 is not. So there were lots of ways to build. I hope you picked something similar. And you made sure I have a starter, I have strong cards in each corner, and I have a good utility card, and I have lots of gaps of 1 or 2 in the hand, especially gaps of 1, so that I can fight against opposing 9s. And I guess the last thing I want to do this video is just like looking at the cards, say some of these cards are not very good. 9-5-7-5 just does not do what we want it to do. It is not a strong corner card, so it would count as our utility card, but it's good at plus walling 8s, but can't deal with 9s at all. This is just not what we want. 9s are going to be the bigger threat. It's not a very good utility card. Something like 4-9-5-6 has a bunch of gaps of 1, but just doesn't quite have the power. Not a very appealing card. 9-2-8-6 is another card that might jump out as possible. The 8 supports the 9, but this is not really what we want from a utility card. It only has 1 potentially good plus wall. I guess the 8 and the 6 gives it 1 plus wall against 8s, but if you look at a card that has 1 plus wall against 8s and 1 plus wall against 9s, and you compare to one of the 8-7-6-5 types that have 3 ways to plus wall 9s and 2 ways to plus wall 8s, it becomes clear this is not a good utility choice to fill out my hand. And I would much rather have an 8-7-6-5 or something like the 7-8-3-8 or the 8-7-8-1, something with just a little more potential. A card I really like that I didn't end up using in any of the hands I showcased is 4-8-9-5. I think that is a tremendously powerful hand. It's one of my favorite number combos on level 8. As we saw, 9-9 is a little more powerful in raw power than 9-8, but 9-8 works together well because the 8 powers up the 9, while the 2 9s sort of exist as raw power and nothing else. So moving more towards 9-8 corners makes a lot of sense, and the 5-4 backside can also plus wall opposing 9s. So I think that kind of card is just a very nice card. Other cards to talk about. The 9-7-6s. There's a 6-7-9-1 in the far left column, and there's a 9-6-3-7 in the far right column. These cards just aren't great. They're not terrible, but they're kind of a little weaker than what we want to be doing. If we're going to build a hand and we can pick powerful cards, we should pick those powerful cards. 8-7-7-3 has some ability to plus wall 9s with the 8 and the 2 7s, but is also kind of a lower power card. There are 2 different cards where the 7 powers up 2 different 8s. This 2 7s power up 1 8, so it's going to be a little more directionally limited in the ways it can plus wall 9s. I don't like that card very much. Another card I don't like very much is 2-9-1-9. It may seem a decent utility card, it's quite powerful horizontally, but it has very little plus wall potential, only the 2 and the 1. It does not help us set up a starter because it can't plus wall 9s in a corner at all. So it's another card I'm not a fan of, and I hope you didn't choose. But yeah, so that's Basic Bob building a standard 4-corner hand, and I think it is a useful way to start building effective hands. And I think one of the keys is just picking powerful cards, that he makes sure to pick powerful cards, he makes sure he has a starter, and he makes sure he is directionally balanced, because having a card for each corner guarantees you're going to have solid amounts of power in every direction. So try building hands like Basic Bob if you don't have a hand build that is already working for you.